Tonight on 16 by 9, new rights for hoarders.
Hoarding is a hugely significant mental health issue.
Meet new fears for landlords.
I'm not going to tolerate somebody walking in with a few pictures of stuff all over the place and saying, I'm a hoarder, you can't touch me.
And then, big business.
This is a Canadian company with $144 million worth of earnings, of profit.
No tax.
Paying zero tax.
And it's a high testosterone traveling circus.
Get out of my face!
Pain and punishment on the road. With the last of Canada's small-time wrestlers.
Boom!
Here's Carolyn Jarvis.
Good evening and welcome to 16 by 9. We've all heard about hoarding from reality TV, bizarre compulsion to collect things until they fill every available bit of space. But here's something you probably didn't know. Hoarding was recently classified an official mental disorder, meaning people who suffer from it have new rights. And that could include the right not to be evicted. As Mike Drolet reports, that isn't sitting well with landlords.
Early evening, September 10th, 2010, downtown Toronto.
A fellow had dropped a cigarette from the 25th to the 24th floor.
Cliff Martin, the building's tenant rep, watched from the sidewalk.
It started to smolder.
A stack of newspapers stored on a tenant's balcony in a 30-story high-rise in downtown Toronto was set ablaze.
According to the fire department's count, it would have been a 9-alarm fire. They don't have a rating higher than 6.
The fire quickly spread from the balcony into apartment 2424. Inside, there was plenty to feed the flames. Piles of paper, books, and other clutter. 27 fire trucks, 120 firefighters on the scene fighting the blaze. Stephen Vasilev was on his way home when he looked up and noticed flames shooting out of the building.
I saw smoke ahead, I saw the fire trucks and so on.
Then Stephen realized the flames were coming from his apartment.
As I got closer, you could see just how devastating the fire was. The fire chief basically said that they're having a hard time of it. It was very intense. I asked them about my cat. I said, I want to know if the cat is safe.
Stephen's cat perished in the flames. Firefighters couldn't get into Stephen's unit. Stacks of books, papers, clutter inside was blocking the door.
I thought that this would be in the national interest to preserve these records.
Stephen was hoarding books, documents, and all kinds of paper he truly believed he had to keep for the public good.
As well, I had beautifully decorated letters from a young lady. I think it was unique in the world. To me, they were more valuable than, say, a Picasso or a Van Gogh or something like that.
To Stephen's neighbors, his precious paper collection was nothing more than a fire trap created by his hoarding. Damage to the building was extensive.
There were about 400 units that were damaged.
Tenants blamed Stephen for his hoarding and the property managers for not doing something about it. 600 tenants launched a class action lawsuit against the landlord and property management company. In October, they settled for $4.85 million. Stephen Vasilev moved across town. We went to see him in his new apartment 3 years after the fire and found out he's collecting again.
I'll show you where they are. The boxes have sort of taken away the access. I'll get out and you stand where I stood.
Stephen says he's waiting for a bigger place, more storage for the materials he's convinced he's legally obligated to hang on to.
They're forcing us to collect the information to hang on to it by law. We're not allowed to destroy it. And then they allow the comments from the public to say, oh, he's a hoarder. Well, you forced us to be a collector.
All of it, every volume, every slip of paper is important to him.
This here is the Consolidated Bank Act. There should be an alphabetical index in here. There's a criminal code here from 1995. Those red books over there, those are Ontario reports. Here we have the Highway Traffic Act. Section 14.1, it says offense regarding false statement, inaccurate information. Every person who submits a false or inaccurate document.
Stephen calls this collecting. Psychiatrists call it hoarding, and it's a big problem.
Hoarding is characterized by this real focus on the need to acquire and keep their belongings, and very significant, really heart-wrenching in some cases, distress around the need to discard.
Dr. Peggy Richter, a psychiatrist at Sunnybrook Hospital, says there's a tipping point where collecting becomes hoarding.
If their living circumstances are now hazardous because of fire risk or bugs or electrical issues or any one of a myriad of problems that can come along with it, we would say this may be a hoarding disorder.
Stephen Vasilev hasn't been diagnosed as a hoarder and doesn't think he has a problem discarding. It's more that he just isn't doing it.
It's a situation that probably could have been prevented if the housing provider had been more on top of it.
Anita Barnes is a community legal worker. She says landlords can avoid calamity by monitoring their tenants' apartments more carefully.
The 200 Wellesley fire really brought awareness to everybody. Landlords, I think, are making sure that they're doing their inspections and making sure that individuals don't find themselves in this situation.
But being on top of a hoarding situation might not be so simple. There's no quick fix for hoarding. One of the markers of the illness is that it can be agonizing to discard. Treatment requires a lot of baby steps over time.
We would work with hoarders to begin challenging by throwing away very small number of items for a very limited time per day, for example, so that they gradually become more accustomed to discarding and their anxiety diminishes.
Anita says when it comes to tenants who hoard, landlords must give hoarders time to clean up their space.
It's difficult for people to let go of their stuff. It may not be easy for an individual who's not a hoarder to understand that, but it causes them great anxiety and great stress. I just recently worked with an individual. It took us over a year and a half till we got his unit to the point where he passed an inspection.
But that doesn't pass inspection with this woman. April Stewart sits on the other side of the fence, fighting for landlords who want to evict problem tenants, including hoarders.
I'm not going to tolerate somebody walking in with a few pictures of stuff all over the place and saying, I'm a hoarder, you can't touch me.
If tenants are claiming they have a mental disorder, she wants to see proof.
I'm going to be putting the hard question to the tenant or the individual representing them. Where is the medical evidence to back this up? I'm going to say, where's your doctor?
As it turns out, she just might be getting those doctor's notes.
Next, new hoarding rights could spell the end for some landlords.
It's an emotional and financial nightmare.
Hoarding, persistent difficulty in discarding or parting with possessions regardless of their actual value. Animals, garbage, books, you name it. According to Dr. Peggy Richter, a psychiatrist at Sunnybrook Hospital, 5% of the population hoards.
Hoarding is a hugely significant mental health issue. It's devastating for the people who have it.
And often scary for the people living around them. Health, safety, fire risks, hazards that come with problem hoarding. Until recently, hoarders renting housing could easily be evicted on those grounds. But now that could change. In May, hoarding was added to the Bible of mental health disorders, the DSM-5, making hoarding a bona fide mental health disorder. It's
very exciting that the mental health community is recognizing hoarding, because until now, there was really no place to diagnose hoarders with a clear disorder.
This clear diagnosis, hoarding, now seen as a mental disorder, means hoarders could have more rights as tenants, making it easier to stay in their home for longer.
Prior to the advent of this diagnosis, one would just say, we don't want them. We don't have to accommodate them any more than we have to accommodate somebody who chooses to set fires for the fun of it.
With hoarding recognized as a disability, landlords may be required to accommodate hoarding tenants, like they would any other disability. Disability is protected under Canada's Human Rights Code. To get hoarding recognized as a mental disorder in a landlord-tenant dispute in court, all it might take is a note from the doctor. Enter the Terminator, a moniker this paralegal is proud of. April Stewart's job is to help landlords evict troublesome tenants, and sometimes those tenants are hoarders.
What would constitute hoarding? I mean, is it garbage? Is it newspapers?
Those are the questions I'm going to be posing at hearings having to do with hoarding now. I want to see the diagnosis.
April's approach to tenants who hoard is no nonsense. Get them out.
You know what? I've got a job to do. I'm advocating for my client, and it's not a popularity contest. I'm fighting for their life.
It might sound like hyperbole, but April says she has seen landlords lose their shirts trying to deal with problem tenants.
Okay, so we got another hoarding case. Check this out. It's an emotional and financial nightmare. I'm getting a little bitter in my old age, and I'm still finding myself, barely treading water on some of the cases because we've got so much stacked against us.
This man we'll call Brian has been on both sides of the debate. He would only speak to us on condition of anonymity.
My father was a hoarder. I was also his landlord. So I had two hats to wear. It became very obvious to me over a number of years that as a family member, I really had no way of dealing with my father's hoarding.
Brian took this home video after his father refused to accept any help in cleaning up his apartment. These images may turn your stomach.
You'll see from the videos, at one point there were actually flies in the house. It was so bad that if a window was open in the house, you could smell the house from the street. I'm showing the congestion of the house, the filthiness of it.
Beyond the filth of the apartment, it was a fire hazard.
Another situation that occurred that might not be so obvious in a hoarding environment is that a resident can't reach light switches anymore. So what my father started doing was using candles for illumination.
Brian took the video thinking one day he might show someone who could help him learn how to deal with his father's hoarding, but he never found that help.
It was just at the point I was unable to clean anymore. There was no room to do it. He didn't want me there.
Brian entered his father's apartment regularly to check on fire and safety hazards. He did this as family, not as a landlord. He says if he couldn't help his father, imagine how difficult it would be for a landlord who isn't related to the tenant.
If a family member has no way of dealing with another family member's hoarding, it's unreasonable to download that responsibility onto a landlord.
April Stewart says it's not up to landlords to play psychiatrist or social worker.
Some people are just messy, and some people are pack rats. At what point are we going to say, this is somebody who really needs some help and they have to be diagnosed as a hoarder? I'm not a social worker. I don't have the qualifications to make that diagnosis.
I've never expected landlords to be social workers.
Anita Barnes is a community legal worker who has helped hoarders fight eviction. She says the only thing landlords really need to do is be patient.
We're really asking them for time. That's the big one. We might ask them to be a bit more flexible about how they do the inspections and when they do the inspections.
Brian accommodated his father, but it didn't fix the problem. It only broke the bank.
So he decided he wasn't going to pay the rent anymore. At one point, I was actually borrowing money to pay my own bills.
Brian lost 6 months' rent and $15,000 in the final cleanup.
So I accommodated in terms of my time, I accommodated in terms of increased fire safety, in terms of greater supervision, in terms of lost rent.
Brian looked after his father until the end of his days. He passed away more than a year ago, leaving Brian the onerous task of finally cleaning up.
And I realized at that point what I'd been going through and the toll that it had taken on me.
Brian's story is a sad one. It's the kind that irks April Stewart. She thinks landlords are being asked for too much, and the government needs to step up and help.
Where do you want these people to live? They have to live somewhere.
That's not up to me now, is it? I mean, if the government is making these policies and writing this legislation to say you have to take care of this guy, but you also better make sure that your building's up to snuff, maybe they should be providing the housing.
But for people suffering from a hoarding disorder, there's no real cure just yet. Cleaning out a home or evicting won't solve the problem. Like any mental illness, hoarding follows a person wherever they go, even their next home.
If there's been no help or interventions done for someone who's hoarded, the next time they get a new place, they're going to start again. Absolutely. I guarantee you 100%.
Stephen Vasilev, the man whose newspaper collection contributed to the biggest apartment fire in Toronto's history, continues to collect.
Is he putting these other people at risk, his neighbors?
Unless he's being treated and was successfully cured, if there's any cure for hoarding, I'd imagine the same thing's about to happen.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.